Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm here to talk about why you should have savings built up and why you should be constantly applying for a new job, even though you might already have a job right now. So, a couple of years ago, I was fired for the first time in my life. I worked a couple of jobs for a couple of years prior to that, but this was the first time I had ever been laid off. I was in a software company that sold their software to other businesses. They were about 200 people when I joined the company and had been around for about 10 years. Despite that, they always claimed themselves to be a startup whenever it was convenient for them. There were no real indicators that they were about to lay off something like 5 to 8% of their workforce when that happened. No pandemics, no recessions, no earthquakes. The company was not profitable, but they were making a bunch of money from their big customers. So they sold to a lot of big businesses. You probably know a lot of them. So much that they secured a new investment round shortly before the layoffs to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. So it wasn't like they were financially unstable or anything. The investors who pumped tens of millions would have done due diligence to ensure that they were healthy financially. So that was really no sign that they were going to do that, lay off a bunch of people. And for me, I had actually started on a really good foot with this company. I had applied for an analyst position, got a call from this HR guy named Tom. Tom told me that I was crazy for applying for an analyst position given my advanced technical skill set. I could do so much more and get into a higher paying position. So he set me up with an interview with a technical lead. And I actually flunked out at this interview because one of the questions that was asked was, what do you see yourself doing in the next 5 years? And I told the technical lead, I've been doing this for a few years, looking to kind of grow myself and eventually get into a managerial position. This guy really wanted someone else. He wanted someone who would be sitting there looking at code for the next 5 years, not really making big changes in their career. However, Tom was in the interview and he liked me so much, told me that I was really nice and friendly, so there's a high potential for lots of people to get along well with me. And he also liked my skill set, as mentioned. So he told me that he'll talk to a bunch of people within the company, see who else has an open spot, and kind of try to fit me in. He did that by setting up an interview with Peter, who would then later become my boss. And at this interview with Peter, it went superb. Peter talked to me as if I had already been hired in the company. He told me about projects, things that they were doing in the department, what the company was doing, what some of their strategies were. It wasn't really an interview because he barely asked me any questions. He would explain a bunch of stuff to me and ask me, so do you have experience doing this? What do you think of this? It felt really laid back, and he was a nice person, really nice boss. So I was hired as a contract employee for the first 6 months or so before being turned into a permanent one. A year after I started at the company, they announced a restructure. I suspect that this was part of the courting process for the investors to come in. Around the same time, they were talking to investors to secure that tens of millions of dollars. And I highly suspect that they were told to kind of shift their priorities around and redistribute the people within the company to different departments. So that's fine. They moved a bunch of people. I was one of them. They moved me from Peter's department into another department run by this lady named Ellen. Ellen wasn't just the head of department. She was also one of the co-founders of this company. She didn't really have the best reputation. She was disorganized and micromanaging, and also loved last-minute work that would cause people to stay and work overtime. But I managed to tell them, hey, you know what? If you're going to move me sideways into another department and also kind of give me more responsibility to become more specialized in the things that I'm doing, then I think I deserve a raise as well. They told me that they would consider a raise, but for now, I would just start out in Ellen's department and work there. And 6 months down the road, they'll have a performance review, me and Ellen, look at what I've been doing, and then from there decide if they want to give me a raise and how much. That's fine. I worked with Ellen for something like 6 months, and at this point, it was time for my performance review. I set up a meeting one day. I kind of slowly eased it in for her. I casually brought up, hey, you know what? It's been like a while since we've been working together, right? Like, how about that performance review we talked about? So she was like, okay, let's set up a meeting. The thing is, she kept pushing back that meeting more than 6 or 7 times, if I recall right. And each time there was something up, like she would be traveling for business, she would be busy doing other stuff, she was busy planning the budget for the next quarter, all sorts of stuff. And understandably so, because she's the co-founder of the company, she would definitely have more work than the average head of department, right? One day, she finally decided to take the initiative to shift the meeting date. So each and every time she told me that she was busy or whatever, I would go into my calendar and reschedule the appointment. But one day she did it. She also renamed the title of the meeting from performance review to my job title. That was kind of a yellow flag, I would say, but anything could happen, right? She could be giving me a title raise. I think one of the last things that one would think of would be getting fired in such a meeting. However, the day came and I walked into Ellen's office, and in the same room with Ellen was Tom, the HR guy. I was like, yep, it's happening. And they gave me a bunch of papers. They offered me a severance, provided that I sign this document to accept the severance. But in that same document, I would also waive my rights, my legal rights to do anything to the company. So I couldn't bring them to court. I couldn't say that they were treating me unfairly or dismissing me unfairly. But I would get something like $8,000. I told them I'll think about it, but I immediately knew at that point that I would be lawyering up to sue. The reason being, I did not feel that it was fair for them to dismiss me all of a sudden. I, for one, was a top performing employee at the company. There were many people who were willing to testify that. I was also working a pretty essential role, so my role was pretty unique within the company. And I had also passed my probation time. So this happened outside the United States. I know the US is known for its bad reputation or stereotype of letting employers fire employees at any time for any reason and have little to no repercussions. But this happened in a country that supposedly has really, really good workers' rights. So I kind of knew some of my rights there, and I knew I would be lawyering up because something stank over here. It didn't feel right. And on top of that, they kind of changed their tune multiple times. So when I was brought into that room with Ellen and Tom, I was told I was being let go because of budget reasons. They had talked with their investors, the investors who had pumped tens of millions of dollars into their company, wanted them to cut back on their spending because they wanted that tens of millions to last as long as they can. I was later told, after I told them I would be rejecting their severance payment and filing a lawsuit, that I was being terminated for performance reasons. They later figured out that me being one of the top performers at the company, they couldn't really have a strong argument there, and they switched their tune again to restructuring of the company, that my role was being eliminated because it was a non-essential role. It's funny because the morning of this meeting when they would fire me, I had a really bad feeling. I checked my bank account to make sure that if something weird happens today, I'm financially prepared for it. And I don't know what gave me this feeling that they were going to fire me. I actually talked to Peter that morning. I said, Peter, I think Ellen's gonna fire me. And Peter was like, you're being ridiculous. Like, why would you ever think that? Like, it's just a performance review. Chill out. You're one of the really good performers in the company. You're doing a great job. I know that. I used to be your boss. You work in a really essential role within the company. Like, everyone needs you. I don't see that happening. You're just freaking yourself out. And yeah, so they decided to ultimately argue in court that they had no need for my position any longer, and that was why I was being laid off. A bunch of other people also got laid off at the same time. Like I said, about 5 to 8% of the 250 or 260 people they had were let go on the same day. So just like me, the moment they told me I was being let go, they asked me to go pack my stuff and escorted me out of the building. And then Tom went back up the elevator, and later I found out from some of those guys, one of the guys sent me a message and asked me if I was fired as well, because he saw me like carrying my stuff. And I said, yeah, I got fired. I'm gonna lawyer up. And the guy decided to lawyer up as well. So I think the moral of the story over here is that people can be let go at any time. Like, it doesn't matter how well your company is doing. It doesn't matter if they've got millions of dollars in additional funding and they have been hiring like crazy. That's not a guarantee that they will not turn around and start firing people. And there's a couple of things that I was able to do because I had savings built up. Like, for one, there was lawyer consultation fees that I had to pay up front, and that cost several $100s and later several thousand. They offered me to just walk away and leave the company with a miserable severance of $8,000. And I was able to refuse that. Like, they told me, that's a lot of money. You're not going to be able to get this offer at any time. Take it. Just sign the document, take your severance, and find yourself a new job. I said, I don't think this is right, and you'll be hearing from my lawyer. So I was able to reject a severance of a few grand, you know. Not if I didn't have a bunch of savings at the time, I would have been desperate and, yeah, that sounds like a lot of money. Yeah, like let me just sign away my rights, like it's better to have some money now and to tide myself over while looking for a new job. Another thing that I did way before that happened, before any of this started to even form or take place, was I was applying for new jobs. I always apply for jobs regardless of how well things are going, and coincidentally having a shitty boss like Ellen, who was like a micromanager, a last minute person, like who would create new ideas at 6 p.m. and expect you to stay until 10 p.m. and overall being really a toxic person, drove me to apply for jobs even harder towards the months before I was laid off. So I was able to actually sign a contract for a new job within weeks of being let go from that company. Had I been resting on my butt and just enjoying the job because I had one, not applying, there was no warning that this firing layoff would happen, I would have had to start from scratch. Like, I would have to start sending out resumes. I would have to start looking up LinkedIn and all these web pages for job ads, and that would be not only time consuming but also resource consuming, because just remember, the day after I got fired, I went out looking for a lawyer and I started speaking to one. The first 2 weeks or so of like getting this whole song and dance, letting the company know that you're not accepting their severance, and then talking to the lawyer, telling them what happened, like, that's stressful. Like, do you really want to add another layer of stress that's looking for a job on top of that? I don't think so. Having this foresight, like, it's just common sense. There is no job that will let you stay with them forever unless your family owns them, And even then, that's subject to family politics and whatnot. It also happened outside the US, I'll say it again, in a country where they apparently have a lot of worker rights. No matter how strong your employee rights are, there's no reversing the firing process. Like, you can sue them in court and try to win for sure. I don't doubt that the chances of winning are probably higher in a country like this compared to the United States for wrongful termination. But I'm not a lawyer. This is not financial or legal advice, by the way. Having a bunch of laws that say that you can't really easily fire anyone hasn't really stopped companies from doing that. So it's important to know that no matter where you are, no matter what what your position is, no matter how essential you think your job is to your company, no matter how good a job you are doing, none of those are guarantees. The only thing you can guarantee for yourself is a constant income and security by applying for jobs consistently and being able to put a roof over your head when stuff hits the fan by having a bunch of savings in your own bank account. Don't rely on severance payments. Don't rely on companies promising you that you get to keep your job. Don't do that. I think that pretty much sums it up, and I hope you learned something.